So today we're going to be talking about Django associations. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but just to reiterate it, this is essentially data modeling. So we had the week of SQL where we created tables and kind of designed them, the interactions between different tables. That's essentially what we're doing with Django associations. So the good news is if you understood data modeling and schema design, you're going to be pretty well established for doing Django associations. The only new thing will be understanding how to implement it in Django rather than doing it in SQL. All right, so let's actually talk about Django associations and how we go about implementing them in Django. All right, so I'm actually going to create a brand new project for this. So again, these are steps that you guys are going to become more familiar with as you do it more and more often. So I just want to go through the motions just so we can understand all the steps for creating a Django project from scratch. So we've been providing you projects pre-made from the past challenges, but this is a case where I'm going to create something from scratch. All right, so I've created a folder and I've opened my VS Code into that folder. So I'm going to bring up my terminal here and get started. So I'm not going to update my VS Code right now. All right, so as we've always talked about, generally we recommend using a virtual environment. So I'm going to create one. So let's create that here, VNV. I'm going to call this DA for Django associations. Let that run. It's taking its sweet old time. All right, there we are. And then I want to actually get into that virtual environment. So I do source, the name of the virtual environment, in this case is DA, /bin/activate. All right, so notice again that I have DA prepended to my command line because that's something we configured earlier in the course. So I know that I'm in a virtual environment. Clear that. All right, next I want to install a bunch of stuff. So again, in the past, we've been giving you a requirements.txt file, and we could just use that to determine what we need to install. But in this case, I don't have a requirements.txt file. So one, I could create it, or I could kind of just install what I need right now. So in this case, I'm going to go with the latter. So I'm going to pip install Django and grab Django. Shouldn't take too much time. All right, that seems to be done. And then I also know I'm going to need psycob. So let's install that. PG2. Install. Okay, that's pretty quick. All right, so I think I'm good with my installs now. Now I actually want to create my Django project. So to do this, we use the command Django -admin, and then we want to do start project, and then we want to give it a project name. So in this case, I'm going to call it, I don't know what I want to call it. Let's call it donuts, just for no reason at all. So one thing I want to point out here, if I actually just enter this, Django admin, start project, and give it a project name and hit enter, let's see what happens. All right, so DA is my virtual environment, so we can ignore that. But I have this donuts folder. If I actually open that up, notice I have a nested donuts folder within that. So again, it's created the project folder and then created another project folder within it. Usually, I'm not a fan of this. Like, I don't like having nested folders that don't really achieve much for me. So I'm actually going to undo this. So I'm going to do rf, get rid of donuts. All right, so notice that my donuts folder went away because I just removed it from the command line. I'm going to run my Django admin command again, but now I'm going to actually put a space and a period after my project name. So on the same command, start project, my project name, and then I'm going to give it a period. So this will create the folder at the same level. So notice I don't have a nested project folder. And again, this is what I prefer. Again, it's up to you. If you want that nested folder, totally go for it. I'm not going to stop you, but in this case, I'd rather have the folder on the main level. All right, so I'm going to manage PY on the main level in my project folder. Sorry, in my VS Code project folder. And then I have my Django projects here. All right, so that was creating my project. Once I have my project, I want to create an app. So again, we've talked about apps. You can have multiple apps within the same project. So that's something that we might do here. So let's actually create an app. So we're going to do Python manage.py. Again, manage.py is basically everything that you need to. You're going to use manage.py. It's kind of how Django is structured. We use start app, and we gotta give it ourselves an app name. So in this case, I'm gonna name it school. All right, so it created a school folder for me. So this is my app folder, has some files in it, and then my project folder has other files in it. So in this case, we're gonna need to create a database for my project. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do create DB, and let's call this Donuts November. All right, don't have that database created before, so that's good. All right, so that database got created. Now I need to go into my settings.py file in my project, my Django project folder. So notice I'm in my donuts folder. I'm gonna go to settings.py, and there's a few things I need to add in here, or at least a couple things. So one thing, I want to scroll down and find the installed apps list that should be in the middle of your file somewhere. Here I want to add the app that I just created. So in this case, school was the name of the app that I added. I'm gonna put that in quotes. Again, double quotes, single quotes, doesn't really matter. I'm more of a double quotes person, so I'm gonna break consistency here. That's what they have, but school is my app name, so I added it to the installed apps. So that should be good. And then I'm gonna scroll down further and then look for something called databases. This is where you specify what kind of database you want to use and then what the name of your database will be. By default, it's set to SQLite, and this SQLite is essentially, I'd say it's a glorified maybe text file. Like it's a local file that acts like a database, but it's not fully a database. But I don't want to use that. So we have Postgres, which is generally better for our needs. So I'm going to type in Postgres or Postgres SQL. I don't know how to pronounce that, but type that in here. So you have Django.db.backend Postgres SQL. And then for the database name, you want to give the name that you create your database. So if I go back in my command line, just double check, I gave it Donuts November as my database name. So I'm going to do the same here. Donuts and underscore November. So again, you need to make sure that your database name matches the name you put in here, else Django will not be able to create database data. All right, so I'm going to save that. So again, the two things I need to change in settings.py was one, the app that I created. You need to add that. Again, if you have multiple apps, you'll need to add multiple apps here. And then secondly, update your database to point to Postgres, and then give it the database name that you want to use. All right, so those steps are done. Generally, I like running one migration. Again, I don't have any school models, but I still have all that other, I guess, default information that needs to be migrated. So I'm going to do Python manage.py and migrate, and it's going to dump a bunch of stuff. So again, these are just default tables or data that Django uses. So that's kind of in my database already. I'm not sure if I even need it, but it's good to be there. All right, so I created my Django project, then I created a Django app. I created my database that I was going to be using. Then I went into my settings.py file, added my app name and my database name to the appropriate places in settings.py. And then finally, I did initial migrations just to get the default data into my database. All right, so a lot of steps there, but again, you guys will hopefully become more familiar with it as you do it more often. All right, so I think I'm ready to go. I'm going to go to my project, or sorry, my app folder, which is school, and go to my models.py. And here, I'm going to start adding some models. So let's get at it. All right, so again, we did a school interface project maybe a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to kind of tailor this to that because I know we created some data models for that. So one model that I know I'm going to need is a students model because you can't really have school without students. Again, we inherit from models.model. And then this is going to have our fields. So, students usually have a name, so I'll give them a name. I could break that into first name and last name, but I just want to keep this a little simpler. So let's go with name, and that's going to be a char field. And max length, let's just go with 64. And then, yeah, I mean, I might add more here, but for now, I'm just going to keep that pretty simple. Another, object that I might have in a school setting would be an instructor. So let's go with a class named instructor. Again, it's going to keep this pretty bare bones. I don't want to make this overly complex. This instructor will also have a name. And all right, so again, very simple classes. Again, we could add more data, like students might have a home address, or they might have like a GPA that they're tracking, but I'm not too interested in all those details currently. All right, let's add a couple more classes. So one is going to be a course class. Courses are what students will, enroll in and what instructors will teach. All right, so course will also have a name. Not being very creative here. Char field. Next length, let's say 64. And let's just add something else for flavor. We'll have a description. All right, so again, hopefully you guys are familiar with everything I'm doing because we've created models before, but creating classes, deriving from the models.model class, and then just creating fields as I wish. So these are all char fields. You could have different types. You have int fields, you have Boolean fields, datetime fields. So definitely more than what you're seeing right now. And all right, so let's actually think about this. So we want to think about relationships that these three objects can have. So again, we have a student object, and again, thinking about what students kind of do at a school, they can have multiple courses they go to. So again, if we think about the data relationships that we have, that we can have between models, we could have a one-to-one relationship, and that's where you could have one and only one connection between two objects. So for example, if I had a student table and maybe like a, I don't know, like a student records table, that would have a one-to-one mapping, as in one student record should map to one individual student. You can't have multiple student records in this case for one student. So that'd be a case of one-to-one. One-to-many, that one is generally the most common relationship you'll find in data modeling or schema design. In this case, like students and course would have a, instructor and course would have a one-to-many relationship. So in this example, one instructor would teach a course, but that instructor can teach multiple courses. So in this case, one instructor can be associated with multiple courses, but one course can't be associated with multiple instructors. We're assuming only one instructor leads each course, right? So that's a one-to-many relationship, right? So in that case, we could add a relationship between these two tables. So let me actually one here. All right, so again, we want to add a relationship between our course and instructor table. So the way to do that in Django is the same way as you do it in a database. You want to create a foreign key relationship. But the syntax is a little different because we're not in SQL, we're in Python. So to do that, I'm going to add an instructor field. And the reason I'm adding it again to my course is because I know that could be at most one instructor, or exactly one instructor for a course. So in this case, my instructor field will use models. And then there's a foreign key function that we use, and this will establish the connection. So in this case, foreign key will take in a model type. So in this case, it'll be instructor, because that's what we're linking to. So again, if you remember from data modeling in SQL, we need to reference some other table. So in effect, we're creating a foreign key relationship and referencing a different table, or a model in this case, and that's the instructor model. We also need to specify what to do on delete. So again, this is very similar to what we're doing in SQL. So again, if our instructor record got deleted and we had a course that was related to that instructor, then we would also want to do something with that data record. In this case, I'm going to default to cascade, which means if that instructor gets deleted, the record in the course table will get deleted also. And then I need to type this correctly. So it's models dot and then use cascade. If you type it all correctly, which I'm going to do. All right, so again, this is the model we're linking to. We're specifying what's going to happen when if a record gets deleted. Again, this is mandatory. If you don't have this and you try to compile it, you get an error from Django saying, hey, you need this field. All right. And then I'm going to add one more field. So we're going to add related names, and we'll talk about what this will do for us. So this related name field will give us an easy access from our instructors, I guess, records. Again, we'll see this in action shortly. So if I do related name, I'm going to give this a name of courses, plural. The reason is because instructors can have multiple courses that they're teaching. So basically, we'll see this magic happen when I get this code up and running. But again, the three fields are model, what to do on delete, and then a related name, which is just kind of like an alias. All right, cool. So again, we modeled this one-to-many relationship with a foreign key. But then we get it a little more complex. So students and courses also have a relationship, but that relationship can be a little different. So a student can be enrolled in multiple courses. So it might be tempting to kind of add a student record here because we have that, one student can be in multiple courses. However, one course can also have multiple students, right? You usually don't have a class size of one. That'd be kind of awkward, but maybe beneficial, who knows? But yeah, so in this case, we could have one course that has many students, or we could have one student that is in many different courses. So this is a case of a many-to-many relationship. And so we got to handle that a little differently than just using a foreign key. So if you guys remember from our SQL days, this is where a join table comes into play. However, a join table isn't always required from Django's perspective, as in you don't always necessarily need to create a join model for Django to handle it correctly. And we can actually see what happens if we don't. So let's actually create a many-to-many relationship here. So in this case, I'm going to call it students, plural. And I'm going to use another field, models.many-to-many relationship, right? Actually, I think I want fields. Yeah, many-to-many field. And so students is going to reference the student table. Student. And then, let's see. Let's actually read documentation here. This documentation is great. Many-to-many field, Django. All right, first result. Seems promising. All right, so if you can kind of just look at what they have here. They have an example of publication and articles, and these two objects or models have a many-to-many relationship. So in this case, they simply specify the model for the many fields. I think that's probably all we need to do. So if I save this, I think this should do what we want it to do in the sense that we don't have to create a join table, but Django will automatically create it for us. So let's actually see this in action and see what happens when I try to apply these migrations. Hopefully I don't have any errors, but quite possible I do. All right, so I'm actually going to apply my migrations from my app here. So I'm going to do Python manage.py, make migrations, and my app name, which is school. All right, no issues, it seems like, but I'm still wary. Manage.py, I'm going to actually commit my migrations. So I do Python manage.py and migrate. Hit enter. All right, looks like it worked. So let's actually dig into our database and see what actually got created. I'm going to clear this, and then I'm going to dig into pSQL, and then my database name was, I believe, Donuts November. Maybe I should have named it more appropriately. All right, so Donuts November is our database for this project. I'm going to do a \d to get the definitions in this database. All right, so this is all the default stuff that I'm not too interested in. I'm going to scroll down. And let's actually look at these tables at the very bottom. So let's see if I can highlight it. I can. All right, so notice that we got a course table, which makes sense because we had a course model, right? Bring this down a little bit. So we had a course model. So Django created a course table for us, which we would expect. We also had a student model. And then if I look at the very bottom, we have a school_student table. Again, it's using the app name first, which is school, and then appending the model name. So school_student is from our student model. Likewise, we have a school_instructor table that got created for us. But actually, if you look right here, let me highlight this more specifically. Right here, notice that we have a school course students table that was automatically created for us. Again, we don't have a student course relationship in our models, but Django auto magically just created one. And the reason for this is, again, if we use our SQL knowledge, we need that join table or through table to model a many-to-many relationship. There's no other way to accomplish that in SQL. So in this case, even though we didn't create that intermediate or I guess joining model, Django did that for us. So this is another reason why Django is kind of just like, very user friendly. It kind of does the work for you so that you don't need necessarily how to do it all the steps. All right. So
question, Encore.
Yeah, go for it.
Since it's a many-to-many relationship, could you put line 14 in the class of student?
Could I put that in class of students?
And just change students to courses, of course.
Yes. So great question. I'm actually going to do that, and it can work, but there's going to be an issue here. I want to know if anyone can maybe see the issue that might come up. So if I do courses here, and then I do course here. This would work because it's many. So I guess it's bi-directional. It doesn't quite matter which one's where. So if I do it like this can work, but there's going to be one major issue here.
When you create the tape model, it won't have courses to reference.
You got it. So the way Python works, which is a little different than like other languages like JavaScript, I define my class, my course class on line 11. However, at line 6, it has no idea of the concept of course here. So in this case, the easy remedy would be I simply would take my course class and move it to the very top. And then, so I could have it this way also, have my many-to-many in my student class, and that works just as well. So yeah, great question there. Many-to-many is, kind of reflexive or bi-directional. So I could put this in my student class and have my course class defined earlier, kind of whatever. I guess in this case, my instructor would have to move to the top also, because instructor is used in my course class. But yeah, that would totally work also. Thanks for asking that. I'm just going to go back to what I had before. Just go with that. One more. All right, there we are. So again, just to highlight, Django created a join table for us, even though we didn't create a joining model. Is the main thing I wanted to point out here. All right, I'm going to trash my terminal. So again, this is possible in that you don't have to create a joining model, but this is limiting also. So the reason you would do this is that because if your joining table has no extra data, then you can kind of forgo creating that model. In this case, our imaginary join table, or I guess actual join table, is just going to contain a student ID and a course ID, and that's all that table has. I guess it might have a third ID for a primary key. But in that case, we don't have any extra data. We could just use a many field like this. However, in our case, we're probably going to want extra fields because if you think about it, there's extra data that a student has associated with a course. Like one that I can think of off the bat is a grade, right? You take a course and you usually get a grade out of it. So you want to tie that grade to the specific course. You don't want to just have like, a separate table for grades that kind of come back to courses. So in this case, I'm going to create a new class. Sorry, let me do this. We're going to call it enrollments. So this is going to be our join table. Enrollments. And then it's still going to be a model. So we'll do that. All right, so this is actually what I just talked about. So our join table is going to join a course. And it's going to join a student. All right. And so again, if you guys remember how to kind of create relationships, it'd be a foreign key relationship in this case, because it's a join table. So we could just point to each individual table. This will point to course. I'll do the same stuff that I did before. I'm just going to copy paste for time's sake. So on delete, cascade is the usual default I go with. Related name in this case would be enrollments. All right, and I'm going to basically duplicate that for my student's record, but point to my student model. All right, so we have two foreign keys in here. The reason I created this join table was because I wanted some additional data. So let's say I add a grade field. It's going to be models. I'm going to have this be a char field, max length of 2. So I think normally you want to like have a GPA It's probably more accurate, but in this case, I'm just going to model it as a plus, B minus, that sort of deal. So max length will be 2. And all right, cool. So now that we have this join table, we could have additional data here. So grade, we could have additional stuff like, time, like the term that the student may be enrolled into that particular class. But in this case, I don't want to add any more fields. So I can't quite, I don't want to have this many-to-many relationship here, so I'm going to get rid of it because we've kind of reflected the many-to-many here. Again, just to review, the reason it's a many-to-many is because one student can be in multiple different courses, and likewise, one course can have multiple different students in it. So that's that many-to-many that we get from there.
So did you just like rename the many-to-many join table as enrollments then? Is it?
Yep. Yep, okay. I created my own table. So Django by default will create, one for you. But in this case, I created my own, so it's going to just use this. Yeah, okay, so let's actually see what we can do with this, because otherwise it's not that fun. So let me bring up a new file. Let's put it on our base here. We'll call this, I don't know what to call it. Let's call it runner.py. All right, so here we can actually use the models that we created. So I'm going to do import from school, which is my app, and then models. And I'm going to import all those models I created. So it's going to be student, instructor, course, and enrollments. All right, so now I'm actually going to create some objects and actually add them to my database. So I probably need to run a migration since I added enrollment, which I'll do shortly. Actually, let's take care of that now so I don't get yelled at later. All right, in my virtual environment, we'll do Python manage.py, make migration school. There we go. Okay, so I applied the enrollment that I added, so I think we should be good to go. So let's actually create some objects. So we have something we do, so I'm going to call it, I'm not going to really name these really that creatively. So S1 will be our first student. We'll give them a name of Bob. S2 will be another student. We'll give them a name of, let's say, Jane. All right, I want to save these. So I'm going to do s1.save. Again, this is how you save a record to the database. But again, if you go back to our validations talk, save does not actually check your data for any validation. So if you actually did have some validations, you would want to do something like s1.fullClean before you attempted to save. So if full clean raised an error, you would not want to proceed to save. In this case, our models don't really have any validation we're doing right now. So in this case, I'm going to forgo that full clean check and just do a straight up save. That shouldn't be an issue, I don't think. All right, so we're going to save these two students, and that's good to go. Let's go back to my models. I want to add some printing capabilities. So I'm going to add my str dunder method to have something better I can print out. So this will be an instance method, and this will return a string, format, return name. So I'm going to add that to all my other classes just so I can print these out and get something that's more human readable. All right, it shouldn't take too much time. All right, let's add student. Sorry. So now that we have those string methods, we can use self.student is enrolled in self.course. And then I guess in this case, if they're still currently enrolled in a class, they might not have a grade, right? They might have a few tests, but they don't have a final grade. So in this case, I'm going to allow this to be null equals true. So a common question that that gets asked is what's the difference between blank and null? So in this case, blank is more from the user side. So if they don't want to provide a value, if blank equals true, then our validation will not check for that. Null is more for the database side. So this is where you're creating that database table. Null will specify that this field can be set to null in the database. So usually if you have blank equal to true, you want null equal to true. So I'm going to do that, and I might need to update my schemas for that, or my migrations. But yeah, that makes sense to me because, again, you might not have a grade in a class you're currently enrolled in. Let me just add one more field here. So print out grade. None. Okay. So that grade is none.
What would happen in the case that you don't utilize or you don't put blank and just put null on its own?
So if you put blank but not have null, I think.
No, if you put null but not blank, or like, yeah, vice versa, whichever.
Gotcha. So yeah, good question. I'm glad you asked it. So if we did it this way, it's not going to be an issue because the way we have it right now is saying Django is going to validate that you have something added for grade, but the database can accept something that's something that is null or none. So in this case, it's not going to be a problem for you or for your database because your database is always going to get a value, and it's going to be like, all right, you gave me a value, that's cool. I would accept nothing, but you're giving me something, so it's going to be fine. However, if you had the other case where you had blank equals true, but you did not specify that null can equal true, so let's say null equals false, which is the default. If you had something like this, you're going to get an issue because your validator is not going to validate for something that's empty. So in this case, your grade might be empty, but if your database is saying, hey, you actually need a value for that, your database is going to fail inserting that record. So when you go to hit enrollment.save, you're going to get an error from the database saying, can't add this field, and please remedy it. So again, if you have blank equals true, you almost always want to have null equals true. But the other direction, you might have cases where you might have blank equals false, but null equals true. I can't come up with a good reason right now, but basically your database is your sole authority, so that has to agree with the data you're passing into it. All right, so sorry, I was going to add some logic that probably doesn't matter. All right, hopefully that should print out what I want it to print out. All right, so I have my string methods. So let's actually go back to my runner. Yep.
For that self.name, is that going to return the actual name or just the column ID?
Could you point out where?
Line 31, self.student. Does it have access to the name just like that?
Yeah, so I'm printing out self.student, and this self.student is going to invoke this str method. So it's going to call this str method.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, so it's a fair question. Yeah. So this by itself would not be able to access the data. Like if I didn't have this str method here, it'll just print out like that, unappealing string that just says student object address something. But in this sense, it's going to call that str method automatically. All right, go back to my runner file. All right, let's create a few more objects. So I want an instructor. I'm going to call him I1 instructor. Name will be Greg, and then save that. Okay, we're not doing any validation, so we're just going to skip the full clean method. Instructor 2, name will be Betty. All right, so we have a couple instructor, a couple of students. Let's create some courses. All right, so this is where I want to highlight, I guess, something that I did before, since I said I would. So if I go to my instructors class, notice I only have a name field here, right? That's the only thing in my model. However, there's additional, I guess, data queries that I can get access to. So this instructor that I created in my course model had a related name of courses. So again, this is kind of like the auto I guess, capabilities of Django, or the magic of Django. I actually have access to something called I2. Again, I2 is an instructor, courses. So this will actually list all the courses that I have for this particular instructor. Again, I don't have that field in my instructor model, but I still have the capability to just easily get all the courses that that instructor is associated with. So they actually printed this out. Might be kind of ugly, but let's see what happens. All right, so I actually need to, have these instructors teach. So let's delay on printing that out. But let's get some courses here. So let's have course 1 equals course name. Let's say biology 101. This needs an instructor. I'll teach it. All the courses need an instructor. So in this case, I1 instructor will teach that. And then we'll have c1.save. Let's have a course 2. Name of that course will be, I don't know, Arts 102. Or sure, 202. And instructor for that will be instructor 1 again. This instructor 1 is multi-talented. And then let's have one more course. So C3 equals course name equals, I don't know, cooking 325, advanced cooking. This will be I2. I remember I added this description here. Just to save time, I'm going to have a default value. In this case, my default description would be empty, so that I don't have to pass it in. If I did not have this default, I would have to pass it in here, or I'll get some complaints from Python. So let's actually give cooking a description, but we don't have to in this case because we have a default. This will be advanced cooking. All right, so we have 3 courses. Course 1 and 2 are taught by instructor 1, and then course 3 is taught by another instructor. All right, let's save all that. All right, so again, I have this I2 and courses. So I want to actually see what that prints out. So let's actually give this file a run. So there's a couple ways I could go about this to run this file. From the terminal, I could run, let me clear this, Python manage.py, and then type in shell, which we'll get into the shell for Python, and I could feed it this file that I just created. So that's runner.py. That's going to execute all this code that I have in here, assuming I don't have any errors. Let's give that a run. And of course, got an error. It's none. So I use double quotes. Make some quotes there. Okay, that was it. Oh, got a comma. Over here. It's 3rd time the charm. Oh. Course. I got myself. Bad. Right, got myself there. Maybe 4th time is charm. All right, there we go. 4th time, charm. All right, so query set course 325. Where did I get that from? Oh, because I printed out instructor 2's courses. I wanted instructor 1. So let's do this once again. All right, so notice this query set has 2 courses in it. I have biology 101 and then art 202. And that's because that's what instructor 1 is teaching. So I scroll up a bit. Instructor 1 is teaching both these courses. So again, the thing I want to point out, this courses, I guess, field is available to us, even though I don't have that field in my instructor model. All right, but we could also do this with our many-to-many relationships. So again, we have students. So let's say I had a student, I want to know all their enrollments. I could do the same thing, but I would need to maybe add something. So let's actually see what we could do right now. So yeah, so sorry, we have this foreign key, and that has a related name of enrollments. So I think via this, I should be able to see it, but let's verify that. So these students need to be enrolled in something. So let's create some enrollments. Down here, enrollments. 1 equals enrollments. Students will be S1, and course will be C1. And then save that. We'll have another enrollment for the same student. So student S1 will be enrolled in course C2. And save that. That's saved. All right, so let's see, we have this student 1. If we did something like this enrollments, notice that VS Code says there's something they know about enrollments. We do all and print that out. So again, this is just really convenient that we didn't have to create these like fields on the model, but they get automatically created when you create relationships between the tables. So if I give this a run, Python runner, and set the grade. No value in column grade relations to blanks. Oh, because I didn't upgrade my migrations. So let's just add a grade because I don't want to do the migrations right now. So students need grades. So grade will be, say they're doing really well in cooking, A+, and let's say they're just not doing so great in biology. So grade will be, I don't know, maybe a B-, decent, not great. Save that, do this. On that. Grade string. Errors today. Okay, there we go. So if you look at the second query state, it's not easiest to read, but if you notice, it says student Bob is enrolled in course biology 101, grade B-, and then another enrollment with Bob in art 202. Oh, so sorry, not cooking, but art. They have an A+ in art. Again, the key thing I want to highlight is once you create those relationships, you have access to all of those relationships automatically. All right, let's keep this going. So I'm actually gonna create a new app. So I'm gonna clear my terminal. Let's create a new app. So to do that, again, I do Python manage.py. My new app will be called, it's called Facebook. And sorry, I need start app, and the name should be Facebook. Okay, so notice to create a new folder here for Facebook. I'm not sure what this entire project is going to be, but this app is Facebook. So it has the same thing. I have a models file that I need to add models to. So let's actually start adding models. And this is going to be a slightly different example, but there'll be a point to this, I promise. All right, so I'm going to just type a bunch of stuff, and hopefully you guys can kind of understand it. Actually, not going to go that route. Let's actually look at what I'm going to create. So I have this database schema that I created from before. And I'm going to try to model. So again, we're just going to try to model something from Facebook, not all of Facebook, because that's going to be quite an undertaking. In this case, I'm going to have a users table, and that's going to have some basic fields like name and email. I'm going to have 3, I guess, tables for content. One's going to be posts. So this is where, like, if I'm a user and I create a new post, like I say, hey, here's my cat doing weird tricks, that'd be a post. There might be comments on that. So like, maybe Chad might comment on my post, say, hey, your cat is really smart and can do some awesome tricks. So that'd be a comment. And then I might want to reply to this comment, being like, hey, Chad, that's, thanks for your comment there. So that's what a reply would be. So again, kind of understand what post, comments, replies are. They're very similar, and they are textual fields. They have an author or user ID, and they have they're associated with some other tables potentially. So comments are associated with posts, and the replies are associated with comments. All right, and then I want to add something that's a little more complex in that I want to add expressions. So expressions in the Facebook sense are like, liking a comment or liking a post or liking a reply, or maybe like, you could do sad face or happy or funny or many other emotions that Facebook offers. So that's where expressions will come into play. All right, so this is my basic schema. Again, hopefully you guys can kind of follow it and are familiar with it since we covered Facebook, I think, in an earlier lecture. But basically, users can be tied to comments, posts, and replies. And a post has an author and some text. Comments has an author and some text, and maybe a post that they're linked to, and replies likewise for comments. All right, so this is where I'm going to kind of try to model up in my Django here. So let's quickly do that. So I'm going to have user and models.model. Let's give it a simple field. So name will be models.char field. Excellent. All right, user is not going to have anything too much more interesting, I don't think. Let's just say email, and we'll kind of stop there. Models.char field. So one thing I want to highlight, just back from our validations, there's some built-in validations we can use. So if I wanted to validate this, I totally could. So I'm going to do from Django core validators, import email validator. Again, kind of get to have that validation that's already pre-built. In this case, I'll do validators equals email, email validator. All right, so this will just check if it's a valid email, so I don't have to do it manually. All right, let's create a user profile. Model. And the reason I want to create a user profile, I didn't really model that in my schema here, but I want to show you one of the relationships that we didn't quite talk about. So in this case, let's say we have this user profile that has like additional data. So like URL for the profile might be models.char field and max length. I don't know how long a URL can be. Let's just say 256, 356, 256. If I wanted to validate that, let's just use that. So I have a URL validator. Again, this is from Django, so documentation, if you want to know exactly what they're doing. But I know that there's a URL validator, so I'll just take advantage of that. And I don't know, what else can a profile have? Let's say profile image can be another URL for me. Let's say in this case, it could be blank, because maybe you don't have a profile image set. True and null. That's true. Okay, what else can we have? So the reason I wanted to create these two models is because I want to actually link them together. And this is actually a different type of relationship that we talked about before. So I'm going to have a user. In this case, we're going to use a one-to-one relationship. So again, if you think about this, you can only have one user profile per user. You can't have multiple users tied to one user profile, nor can you have one user have multiple user profiles. So this is the one-to-one field that we're going to establish here. So if I do that on user, we do a similar thing that we did with foreign key. So essentially, this is a foreign key, but it's strictly one-to-one. It's not a one-to-many relationship. On delete, there's going to be model.cascade. And we're going to give it a related name. Again, this is just an alias, so we'll call it profile. All right. One thing I want to highlight here is you can essentially do the same thing with a foreign key. And I'll kind of defer the documentation to describe the differences. There's a subtle difference, but effectively it's going to be the same relationship. So if I did a foreign key here, I'll do user, on delete, have all this stuff. All right. But if I left this as is, this relationship would be a one-to-many. So this would effectively say that one user can have multiple user profiles, which is not what I want. So there's additional parameter you could pass in for a foreign key, and that is unique, I believe, unique, not unique. It's unique. Yep, all right, so you can pass in unique equals true, and this will enforce that you can only have one user tied to one user profile. So again, line 11 and line 12 effectively do the same thing. A one-to-one field is the same thing as a foreign key with a unique value of true. All right, there is a slight difference on how you kind of use, I guess, the alias relationship there, but effectively these are the same thing. So you could kind of use them interchangeably. I'm just going to use one-to-one field because that's something we've not used before. All right, so one user can have, each user can have at most an exactly one user profile. All right, so that was the point of that class. Let's add a few more things and then kind of speed up this demonstration. So we talked about having a post. So we'll call it post models model. This will have a text field for the actual content. And this will be models.char field. Let's say max length for a Facebook post is 1,024 characters. And that's all we care about. So we're going to have an author. Let's call it poster. Again, this is a relationship we've seen before. This is going to be a foreign key. because one user can have multiple posts, but one post can't have multiple posters or authors. So foreign key. Let me just copy this for brevity's sake. Posts. All right, so that's going to be our post class, our post model. Then we want, we can have additional fields here. I'm not going to bother with that, but we have like a date. That'd be sensible for a post. I just want to get the bare bones in here. So let's have a comment. Comment to be very similar.
If you get too far, you need an S on the model under poster.
Thank you. Models.model. All right, that's going to be exactly the same thing as a post, except it's called a comment. So we'll have a commenter, and this will have a foreign key. This will be comments. The only difference with the comments is that it's linked to a post. So I'm going to need a post as a relationship here. So I'm going to do models that foreign key. Again, so one post can have multiple comments on it, but one comment cannot be associated with multiple posts. That is why it's a one-to-many relationship. Hence, we're using a foreign key. Copy this. Right there. All right, so we should be good to go there. Excuse me there. Finally, we want replies. Copy this. And call this reply. And reply. Okay, so I got all these down. Let's actually make sure we're good to go here. So I'm actually going to save this, run migrations.
There's a couple S's missing in your two bottom classes.
Oh,
Comment and yeah.
Good eyes there. Thank you so much. Saved me the trouble of running this one.
One more. In comment class under post.
Make migrations. And this is a new app, so this new app is Facebook. Oh, does anyone know what I forgot to do?
Edit in the settings app.
Absolutely. So I forgot to add my app there. Hence, my project has no idea of what this app is. Let's add that there. Do a quick save. Notice I got this error, no installed app with label Facebook. If I run this again, hopefully that works. Yes, it does. And then I gotta run my migrations. Okay, cool. So let me quickly update my runner. So I'm gonna get rid of all the stuff here. And then let's from Facebook models import where we have user. Don't care about user profile. Let's go with posts, comments, reply. All right, so let's have a user1 equals a user. And then I don't think I have any other fields there, or what I have, email, sure. Email equals show@whitehouse.gov. That's legit. All right, u1.sync. Let's do a u2 quickly. This would be, I guess, Jill Biden. And, all right, so we have u2 and u1, so these are users. Let's create a couple posts. So let's say Joe Biden wants to make a post, so he's going to do post. The poster will be user1, which is Joe Biden. Not a quote. Let's say his text for that post is going to be, we sent Major and Champ. So I don't know if you followed this news story, but apparently the first dogs got sent back home because one of them bit one of the security staff. So back home, set face. All right, so that's gonna be a text. I don't think we need any other fields. So we'll do p1.save. Let's say Jill Biden wants to comment on it. So she's gonna comment on it. So let's create a comment. Let's create one more post before we're done with posts. All right, so this will be another news story. let's say stimulus care package passed. All right, that's post 2. Same poster, so Joe Biden's making all these posts. We want to save that. And okay, so now we're going to add a comment. So a comment's going to take, again, a commenter. In this case, it'll be user 2, which is Jill Biden. Have some text. So let's say Jill said, so sad. Let's say it was major bit 1 of our security staff. All right, so that's our comment. And then we get to associate this with a post. So I'm going to do post equals P1. So that's, she's replying to Joe Biden's text or post of we sent Major and Champ back home. Save that. And then let's say we get another comment. C2, comment. We only have 2 users here, so I'm not going to get that crazy. Say Jill Biden posts another comment on that post. Sad to see the dogs. All right, this is on the same post, it's just a different comment. C2 and save. All right, let's actually run this, and I want to actually look at some data. So I'm going to do something like print post 1 dot comments. Again, that's the same thing we did in the school example. I'm going to do p1 dot comments dot all, and go with my models. Probably need to add some string methods. So do string self string. Sorry for all this typing. Self dot text is what we care about. I don't care about the poster. Right now, text. So this is going to be a reply. It's going to be a comment. It's going to be a post. I will add this in. All right, just adding some informative strings so I could actually read out what we have. So reply will be self dot replier. All right, hopefully you guys are following along. Just adding some informative strings. This would be on a self comment. Okay, a lot of typing there. Let's actually run this and see if this prints out something informative. So do a clear. Don't think I need to migrate. So it's on the runner. All right, so we got a query set. Again, kind of hard to read, so maybe I want to format this. But if you can see, we have 2 comments. Major bit 1 of our security staff, and the second comment, sad to see on the dogs leave. So these were the comments by Jill Biden on the original post. So P1 is original post. Comments just extracts all the comments that are on that post, and we print that out. So let's make this a little prettier. Print title and preset for All right, we'll go with that. All right, so if I format that a little nicer, it might be easier to see. All right, there we go. So the original post was we sent Major and chat back on, and we have some comments on it. Major bit some people, and then we had to post. Nothing too fancy seen there. The real thing I wanted to show you guys, find my models. Let's talk about the case of adding expressions. So we talk about having an expression. So let's say I want a like or thumbs up or whatever Joe Biden's tweet, or not tweet, sorry, post. I would add an expression. That's the idea of expressions here. But also I might want to add expression to a comment, maybe like Jill Biden's comment. I might want Jill Biden's comment. I want to add a sad face because the dog's, she was sad that the dogs left. Likewise, there might be replies that I want to add an expression to also. The current way we have it here, we have this join table for a post because it's associated with post and it has a post ID. If we want a comment, like a comment expression, we're going to have to recreate an intermediate table for post expressions. Sorry, for expressions, it's going to be comment expressions. We're also going to have one for replies. So it's not the most, I guess, robust, right? Because we're going to create different intermediate tables that are pretty similar. So this is where I want to show maybe a more advanced feature of Django. And I know we're approaching lunchtime, so I'll try to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes. But let's actually add that class of expressions. Expression, which will be models.model. And this will have a type. I'm actually going to copy what I have to save time. So we have expressions class. All right, I'm just copying this from some of the source that I already have. Speed this process up. All right, so we have an expression class. It just has an expression in it, which would be like, like or sad face or funny or whatever it would be. That'll be that. Then we want to create this join table, right? So I'm going to copy this also. And I'll talk about it so that we understand what it's doing. There. All right. So as we talked about in my original example, I have a post expression join table. And just going back to my schema, my expressions is an ID and a type. So this would be like, you might have a like type, you might have a sad face, you might have a funny, you might have a shocked expression. That's what the expression table contains, just all the emotions that you can have. And then the post expressions joins our emotions or expressions table with our post table. So that's the intermediate table that we have created. So that's the model that I have reflected right here with post expressions. So this post expression has a foreign key to a post, has a foreign key to a user, because a user is the one that's expressing, creating an expression. And then we also have a foreign key to an expression type. So like, for example, I might be a user, that'd be the foreign key here. I might like a post, and that post would be Joe Biden's post about the dog leaving or something like that. So that's what these three fields are reflecting. All right, I have an str method. I added a unique constraint. So, it's the same idea that you could do in SQL, having unique constraints. So we talked about this before, I think, in that the same user cannot have a different expression on the same post. For example, if I like Joe Biden's post, I can't also have like a sad face expression. Just Facebook limits you to one expression per post or per comment. You cannot have multiple expressions on it. So I've added this unique constraint. And so the syntax for that is you add a class meta, and this is in the documentation. But you add a constraints list, and then you want to add a unique constraints field, and then specify the fields that need to be unique. So this could be one field, or this could be several fields. In this case, my posts and users together needs to be unique. So I could be a user liking multiple different posts, or I could have a post that's liked by multiple users, but I can't have the same post that's liked by the same user multiple times. So that's what this unique constraint is adding. All right, but the key issue that I brought up before is this is only specific to my post, right? But if I want to add expression to comments or to replies, I'm going to need an entirely different join table to accomplish that. And that's actually going to be kind of redundant because for the most part, this data is the same. Every expression has a user. Every expression has an expression. And it's tied to some textual field, whether it be a post, a reply, or a comment. So this is where I want to introduce the concept of a generic foreign key. And this is kind of going to make our lives a little easier. So to do that, I'm going to need to include a few items up here. So I'm going to go about doing that. So from Django contrib. Again, I do not have these memorized. I'm kind of typing from reference here. Models, right? We want to import something called content type. All right, this is kind of like a placeholder for a model. We'll see that in use shortly. Secondly, I want to include Django.contrib. Content types fields. I'm going to import something called generic foreign key. Spell that correctly though. And then also something called generic relation. All right, so this is going to allow me to associate with different types of models in a single table instead of having to create 3 different tables for my 3 different models I want to link to. All right, so this is actually kind of convenient. So I go back to my post expression. I'm actually going to copy this and create a separate one just for comparison's sake. So in this case, I'm going to call this unimaginatively generic expression. Still going to take in a model. Still going to have a user. So users are always the same, as we always reference the user table. So that stays the same. Expressions, same thing. We always have the same type of expressions. But posts needs to be generic in this case. So to achieve this, I'm going to have to do something slightly different here. So I'm going to add a value of content type. And this is, again, a placeholder for whichever model I want to associate here. So content type. And in this, for the foreign key, it's going to actually reference content type, which I imported above. And the rest of this should be the same. So this, we don't need a related name, I don't think. All right, so this is like a generic object, content type. Then we're going to have something called object ID. And this is going to be the ID for whatever model we're linking to. So again, we don't know if it's a post ID, reply ID, or a comment ID. But in this case, we don't care because it's going to be generic. So we're just going to ensure that this is a positive integer field because we use integers for our keys. And then finally, our contents will be generic foreign key. And this will reference contents type. Type that without typos. And then objects ID. All right, so what this is effectively doing is this value is going to be brought in from whatever model we use, which is content type, and then it's going to reference the ID for that type. All right, so again, this is the formula for creating a generic foreign key. You need a content type, which is a foreign key to the content type model. You need an object ID, which in this case is just an integer. It doesn't have to be an integer, like it could be a string if that's what your foreign key is in your tables that you're looking to. In this case, I know it's an integer, so I'm just going to keep that as positive integer field. And then I'm going to tie those together in a generic foreign key. All right, so let's actually see both of these in play, and then we can wrap this lecture up. All right, go to my runner file, and all right, we have some comments, we have some posts. We want to add in some expressions here. So let's go expression user.supercharts. All right, so I'm just going to clear my data tables. So this is one way I could go about doing it, since it'll give me errors if I try to have some duplicates potentially. Delete and reply objects.delete. Okay, so I'm deleting everything, recreating everything. Let's create a quick expression. So expression E1 equals expression, let's say this will be a like. And we have another expression, say E2. This will be, let's say, sad. All right, just 2 basic expressions, and we're going to save those to the database. All right, now we could actually use those for a post. So when we had post expression, let's have a post expression. So this is where we had our post expression objects that we need to import. post expression and generic expression. All right, sorry guys, I'm running long here. I know we haven't taken a break, so hopefully I'll be done with this soon. Post expression and generic expression objects dot two. Okay, so again, we have a post expression, so this will take in a post, which in this case, let's use post one. Let's say the user is going to be Jill, so Jill's going to be reacting to Joe Biden's post. So that's U2, which is Jill Biden. And then she's going to have an expression. So let's say her expression was a sad face. So we're going to use X2. All right, so this is creating a post expression. Let me save that. And I could do something like, so if I had post expressions, I could do expression. Let's go back to, so my relay name is post expressions for my post expressions. So that's what I can use in my runner file. So I'll do px1 dot, oh, sorry, I'll do p1 dot post expressions. So this will actually reference that expression. Again, the same way we did it in the school. We don't have this field on our post, but we still have access to it through the relationship that we set up. So I'll actually print that out. Oops. Save that. Manager. Rid of all these. I got to use an all here to access the values. Yeah. Bouncing all over the place. All right, so I need to make my migration because I added some data. Let's do that one last time. Hopefully, UI, make migration for Facebook. Okay, that finally worked. Let's migrate. And let's run our runner. Where'd you go? There you are. Router manager. Okay, so let's give this a run. So as you can see, down here, post one expressions, Facebook post expression of none. So we want to do dot all. What am I missing? Here. Okay, so here we go. Post one expressions. Jill Biden expressed sad for post. We sent Major Champ home. All right, so this is only for posts. The last thing I want to show you, I promise last thing, is the fact that I use generic expressions. So instead of using post expression, I can use generic here. And this can also be tied to the very same post. So again, I'm using, it's going to be content equals P1. Because again, content is the value I gave for my generic object. So content, I'm going to assign that to P1. And otherwise, it's going to be effectively the same thing. All right, so let me clear this. And then this would be generic. All right, so notice that we get the same thing. Generic expressions is using that generic expression class, which is using the content type and the generic foreign key. But the whole reason I did this was because if I want to take this and now apply it to a reply or a comment. So let's do content equals C1, and user can be U1, expression can be a like. Right, so this is a generic expression. Now I'm actually creating a reply. So content is C1. Sorry, not a reply. Sorry, I'm doing an expression on a content instead of a post. I'm using that generic expressions object. So this can be comment one C1. This needs to be G and G here. G1. C1. All right, so G expressions is the name I gave it in my related name field, so that's what I'm using here. So P1 G expressions all should match P1 post expressions all, and then I could do that for comments also. So let's do this. That's error, post has no G expressions. Last thing I needed to do. All right, so notice that I also added this generic relation. This is what you need to go the reverse direction. So I could access all my, let's see, if I did something like qprint expressions used, I could do something like gx2 dot, what is it? Content. All right, let's forget that. All right, so I need to add a generic relation here. So I'm going to go to my, let's see, post. There's post over here. I'm going to need to add one more field. So this would be expressions equals models generic relation. And that's going to be tied to generic expression. That's what I want. Yep, all right, so I want generic expression, and that should be good to go. And this is the name of the class that I have, and this is the relationship that I've imported from Django. The only problem here is that these three buddies of mine need to be moved down because they're referenced here. Okay, that's down there. Post expressions can move with them. Okay, so I relocated these classes because there's dependencies. Namely, I added this, where'd it go? This generic relationship that relies on generic expression. So that's going to need these relationships. So now these fields expressions can use that generic relationship. So in this case, I want to do expressions here. Expressions here. Save that. Clear this. Run. Generic expression has no attribute post. Where am I using post? Generic expression. I want to go down to my generic expression. This is not post, this is content. Otherwise, everything else should be the same. All right, finally, we got what we wanted. So notice we were able to find the comments, or we were able to add an expression to a comment using that generic expression. We didn't know how to create a new table for it. So the bottom two lines here are using the same class. One is for a post, the other is for a comment. We applied an expression to a post and a comment, yet we're using the same as that class. So this is the whole idea of having a generic foreign key, where you can use multiple models within the same class. All right. A lot of information there. Again, sorry, ran into your lunchtime. Definitely took longer than I expected.
Hey,
But yep.
sorry to interrupt you, man. I want to know if you can make this file available to us by any chance, so we can have it maybe like as a reference.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know I kind of sped through it. I do have it coded up, so I'll kind of add some comments to make it more readable, but I'll post it for sure. Definitely want to make it available since I have it there. But yeah, again, all this stuff you can read in documentation. That's where I learned it. But yeah, documentation is pretty easy to get through. Basically, just understand for having a generic relationship, you want to have something called content type, which has a foreign key to a content type model. Again, that's something that you import. Object ID is just a generic value, usually an integer for your model. So in this case, if my model is post, this will be post ID, or if it's comment, it'll be comment ID, and then content will be your actual value that's referenced by generic foreign key. All right, let me stop the recording now. And